Welcome to episode 36 of the FoodGrads Podcast, the podcast where we explore careers in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. I'm your host, Veronica Hislop, a molecular science graduate student and career partner with FoodGrads. This week on the podcast, I interviewed Jennifer Crandall, owner, founder, and CEO of Safe Food En Route, LLC, providing a vast array of services which include foreign suppliers verification programs, services, and food safety consulting. Their team's goal is to make corporate-level food safety programs accessible for everyone. On this episode, Jennifer talked to me about all things food safety. I learned about what exactly a food safety consultancy does and why they can be an integral part to many small and medium-sized businesses in their food safety plans. Jennifer talked about her career journey and particularly her time working in corporate food safety and the ways that it's different than working in a food safety setting within the food manufacturing facility. We also talked about the importance of planning in your careers and the daily habits that Jennifer takes to manage her consultancy and how she has dealt with pushback. So, enough with that introduction, let's get on with the show. And with that lovely introduction. So, hi, Jennifer. Thank you for coming on the show today. I wanted to promote food safety. And when I saw your interview on the food safety tech, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was this lovely piece done on you about the success and how you've gotten to where you are. And I had to capture this and get you on the podcast. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here.
So I'm going to jump right into it. First of all, can you tell me more about Safe Food En Route LLC and what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a food safety consulting company at the core. We are very focused on three different categories of services. One, which I launched the company on and wanted to be most focused on, that was the new regulations for FDA, Food Safety Modernization Act, for importers. And it's called the Foreign Supplier Verification Program Rule, a big mouthful and an acronym that we love to say, FSVP. So if people hear that term, that's what that stands for. So a big part of our business when I launched, it was just me and trying to help companies navigate that rule and help them do the food safety work that's required by importers to meet the law regulations. It quickly escalated in the next couple of years to two other categories, which include food safety consulting for manufacturing companies, mostly domestic, but we do work some internationally, to meet FDA or USDA regulatory requirements, and then also to meet food safety certifications requirements that are in line with like Global Food Safety Initiative, another acronym, GFSI. And those requirements are usually put on manufacturers and food companies by grocery retailers and by large wholesaler companies and some of their minimum requirements. So we help with that. That's the second bucket. And then the third bucket is a new bucket that's developed over the last year, but very much in line with the other two, is diligence work for private equity. And what I like to just describe that, and we can dive into it later if you want to dive into it more, but I like to describe it as the home inspection of the purchase of a food company. And so usually we work 100% with a partner who does operational diligence work, and we do the food safety diligence. And we're looking at food safety programs and trying to help the buyers of the manufacturers understand what type of insights and perspectives that facility is currently in, and then maybe what it might take to invest in them in the future to level them up, make them maybe more marketable from a branding perspective or more marketable from a perspective of trying to have another company purchase them down the road. So maybe a consolidation purchase or to that effect. So those are the three buckets. So FSVP, food safety consulting for certifications and regulatory requirements. And then the third is the diligence.
Wow. I'll be honest, just listening to you, my head's kind of in a spin with how many things that you keep track of because I've had a touch of working in food safety and like you've mentioned with the many acronyms, it's amazing to me like for you to be so knowledgeable and having your consultancy being able to pick up all these pieces that's commendable and not a small feat.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. It is hard. And I do have a team of people that help me manage it. So starting out, and I naively thought as a business owner that I could just do the consulting myself. And I spent a lot of time in that first year trying to be the sole consultant, sole entrepreneur in the space for FSDP. But the volume of companies that need assistance and to sustain me as the owner of the company, to get to a level of a salary that is comfortable, I had to continue to grow the volume. And because of that, I quickly ran out of capacity to be able to do the work myself. And so I've gone from being one person to my administrative team is about 10 people, and we're supporting about 24 food safety consultants and experts. They do subcontracted work. It's part-time work mostly, but so that's adding up to 30 to 35 people on a regular basis of managing. So I don't do it alone. There's no way to do this type of work alone at all. You have to have a team to be able to do it. You can focus very isolated events as an individual, but without a network of a large group of consultants, it's going to be very difficult to manage, like you said, what we're trying to manage. So it's a lot of different elements for sure.
That's amazing. And to grow the team so large, and I would say food en route is maybe fairly new, but to grow it out to that team, again, it's impressive. And I guess I wanted to already start diving into building up this team. How have you gone about doing this, or how have you shaped your team to match the vision?
As the CEO of the company, I probably, in the early stages, it was just convenience and proximity. So I started out, somebody would organically introduce me to someone else, and then I'd be like, hey, do you want to work with us? And it grew over I would say the last year and a half. We've had tremendous growth and we're very targeted on the type of people that we're looking for. So there's certain qualities that we want with bedside manner per se, where they're easy to work with our clients. They have good relationships with them. Our clients are very pleased with that, with their demeanor, but also with their knowledge base. So we, at minimum, all of our team members for the food safety experts have about 10 years of experience at minimum. Many of them have well over 20 to 30 years of experience. So we're very targeted in who we're asking to come to the table and work with us because we want to give a high quality caliber to our clients. Our mantra that we say is on a lot of our paperwork is making corporate level programs accessible to all businesses, really. And that corporate level program that we offer is to our clients, but also to the team members. Because when you step out to become an independent consultant, independent is the key word. And you might have a network depending on the length of time you've been in your career, and it might be a great network, but it's not cheap to have that network at your fingertips. Attending trade shows, attending conferences, being part of industry associations can be costly, even though they discount it to you. We've developed on an internal scale to help provide that community and that assistance and that connection of technical and leadership development within the company. And that's something that I think is becoming more and more of a leverage point for us to attract very quality subcontractors and consultants to work with us because they're excited to have that kind of community with us.
Well, it's exciting as well, having this amount of experience to be able to help a food company get to a higher, to what you said, a corporate food safety level. And it takes years of experience to know the in and outs because there's a lot of little nuances when it comes to food safety programs that although you can work very hard in your newer years that you just aren't aware of.
Right. I was very naive, and a lot of the people that I've encountered now running the business, many of them, I joke that I really wish that I would have known them as they are now when I was in the first 10 years of my career, because I was making a lot of decisions without support. And it wasn't necessarily that they were the wrong decisions, but I might have made them differently had I had a little bit more support or somebody to go to be able to ask questions. And I just didn't know how to effectively utilize the programs that I was around. I saw it. I know one of the discussion points that we had kind of pre thought through was, how did I get to where I am in my career? Because I had exposure, and again, we can dive into it in a minute
Mhm.
if you want to dive into it more, but because I had exposure to both publicly held and privately held companies in my earlier years of my career, I saw the safety net of that large corporation, the Krogers, the Safeways, the Walmarts. I had a really good understanding of what their corporate program was. And so I had like this, what I would call a safety net of people to rely on internally to ask questions. When I was in the privately held companies, I was the top person on and with knowledge about food safety. And that's being under 10 years of experience. That's where a lot of the smaller and medium-sized companies are. They don't have the ability to afford somebody who has 20 to 30 years of experience. And so they'll hire people who have less than 10, and that means that they don't have that experience, that knowledge to draw from to be able to make decisions better and to be able to stand up to the standards or the programs the way that somebody that's been in the industry that long would be able to do. So we like to come in and stand side by side with those people who might have less experience to be able to help them navigate questions or prompt questions that they wouldn't have known to ask.
Mhm. Now hearing as to what you were saying, it's prompted me in this direction that I want to take because I do want to learn a little bit more about the challenges that these businesses face, but I do think it would be an appropriate time to know more about you because we haven't really established how you've gotten to where you are right now, considering so much of what you've spoken to is from things you've learned throughout your journey. So I would love to have you walk me through your career and how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. I graduated in 98 from Purdue University in their food science department. I had taken on one internship during that time because I was a transfer student. So I only had a couple of years at Purdue. I was at a junior college prior to that. The internship was at the time, it was Universal Flavors, which is now Sentient Flavors in the flavor industry. So I had kind of this exposure to the beverage industry because the facility I was in was doing beverage work and R&D work for flavoring. And it was just really like it was a new experience for me. The exposure to mass volume was starting to surface, I guess.
Mhm.
After I graduated, I started out in manufacturing and I spent the next 8 years in manufacturing. And I went from different levels of production supervisor. Well, I started as a trainee, as a management trainee. And then I kind of graduated up to production supervisor. And then I was in quality assurance supervisor role, sanitation, overseeing the food safety, but it was more quality control than quality assurance. And then I got into the quality assurance role where I was writing programs, writing the HACCP plans, another acronym, right? I'll try to spell them out so people know.
Please
Uh,
do.
so, yeah, HACCP, hazard analysis, critical control points. That's something that's very prominent in the food industry. We use that a lot. I was writing HACCP programs. I was writing SOPs, standard operating procedures, and policies and procedures and forms to be able to support the programs that we had in place. And then I shifted into the product development slightly in a juice company. So my background, though, spent a lot of time in dairy, in fluid milk, in cultured products, ice cream, premix ice cream and frozen novelties, and then also yogurt, sour cream. So I had a good, strong foundation there. And then I also worked in a juice canning facility that did canning, but they also did aseptic juices. And so I had a little bit of experience and exposure to aseptic. I ended my manufacturing career in a UHT facility, ultra high temperature pasteurization. And I sometimes joke that I got a master's degree at that facility for UHT processes. What those experiences exposed me to, I was food service customers, I had retail customers, and kind of seeing the differences of how those companies managed us and what their needs were. So, from the manufacturer perspective, I got that. Plus, I was in the dairies getting to manage raw milk and the raw milk receiving. And so, at the last facility I worked in, I was working very much with the farming community and trying to help them get the best quality of milk, the best bacterial counts, before pasteurization, and just trying to help them isolate and identify where they had risks. So that was the first 8 years. I lived in several different places during that time.
Wow.
So we moved around, and that's very normal for the manufacturing world. People jump, you jump a lot, you move up the ladder, or you stay at the same level. But it tends to be a revolving door in the manufacturing facilities, at least when I was there. I don't know if
Mhm.
it's the same anymore, but in the environment I was in, I think that was pretty normal. And then I moved into Kroger corporate. So I started working in their corporate food technology department because I was tired of the manufacturing space because I was moving around so much. I didn't really have the stability I was looking for. And I also recognized the private versus public. Like Kroger, I started at Kroger in one of their dairies, and I wound up going back to Kroger. And I honestly, when I started back at Kroger, it was 2006 in their corporate food technology department. I thought I was going to end my career at Kroger. I had no idea that I was going to start a business in the future. That was never even on my radar of starting a business. So I worked in Kroger. I had 4 or 5 different positions there. Most of them were in the corporate food technology department, supporting private label products and doing quality assurance, sensory panels, setting up, cuttings where we would just make sure that they were meeting standards, comparing them to competitors, et cetera. And then some of the Global Food Safety Initiative, the GFSI requirements started happening in 2008. And so I became the person who managed all of that volume of data and making sure that companies were meeting that requirement of Kroger. And that was at the time I started it, it was from the private label side of it. So this is way back in 2008. But in 2008, there was about, I would say I was managing about 1,000 suppliers. And that was a 1-to-2 ratio of manufacturers. So about 2,000 manufacturers, making sure they were meeting the requirements. And then we continued to require that of more and more types of suppliers. So we evolved it into the what I call the perimeter of the grocery store. So the produce kind of groups, the deli meats, the meat department, the seafood department, things that you would go in and purchase a product and assume that it was Kroger's brand, but it was not necessarily Kroger that was manufacturing it. So we were anything that looked like the brand, we were like, okay, they need to meet these food safety standards.
Mhm.
And I was the one reviewing all that information and making sure that they were and holding them accountable to it. By the end of my time at Kroger, I would guess I was monitoring about 10,000 facilities. And which, like when you hear that number, it's ginormous.
Yes. Yes, it is.
It's a lot of data. It's a lot of data management. It's learning how to manage data more than it was food safety information. Was I reading every single audit? When it was 1,000 to 2,000, yes, those were all the private label companies that were producing the product for Kroger. And I was reading every audit report, and I was looking for specific things in those audits and using my knowledge of the previous 10 years to apply to that. The 8 years in manufacturing and the 2 years doing some quality assurance for the company. And so I was using that experience and going, here's the trends that I'm seeing, and I would give reports. And then as it grew into GFSI requirements, I relied heavily on because Kroger and many of the larger retailers and wholesalers required that they agree with the spirit of GFSI that the accountability is in the audit protocol, the way the program is written. So I started relying more on, are they certified? And if they're certified, I'm comfortable. I'll read their quick summary report and double check that they didn't have any major hazards, and then we'll move on.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that at the end of my career. Now I did take a 3-year detour before the FSVP requirements went into effect. So my 3-year detour, I was in global sourcing. So I took the information, that data management, from Excel spreadsheets to data access database, and then into a cloud-based software partner that we utilize to collect the data. And once I got to that point, I really couldn't do much else to improve the process. So I felt like I could hand it off to someone else, and I applied to a global sourcing position and moved into a new role. It gave me a promotion, which is, when you get certain levels in technology, you aren't always able to move up unless you go a different route in your career. So I did global sourcing, and I vetted companies for Kroger. I got to travel internationally. My main responsibilities were to look to see if we could direct import products and see if that was manageable and cost effective. So I had a good 3 years of kind of like international business, from an education perspective. And that whole time I felt like, do I need an MBA? Do I need to go back and get an MBA? Because I only still have a bachelor's degree. And I concluded I didn't. And then the FSVP rule went into effect. And with the international business, the global sourcing piece, plus all of my previous background, it just lined up very perfectly to say, go back and help the company. So the company needed, the way the rule's written, there are 2 entities that can act liable as FSVP importer. So the FDA defines an importer differently than the US Customs rule. And the only 2 that can act as it is US customer or the US consignee, which might be like a distributor or an importer that's warehousing it and owning it until the retailer or wholesaler purchases it. So a lot of companies did the same thing at that time. They said, if there's 2 of us that can act as an FSVP importer, then we're not going to do it. So that put all the liability on those distributors, importers. And then my conversation started. And then the last year of my career at Kroger, while I was helping them design software to help manage, so I was business lead and helping them build a software tool to be able to manage all the volumes of information that we needed to manage and expand that 10,000 suppliers to a lot bigger, because it includes all suppliers of Kroger, not just the ones that are of food. And it's like probably out there in like the 60,000 range of different connections that they have to go through that system now. But for me, I also was having conversations and being the face of the company to the importers and telling them, you have to do this work. And they had no idea where to begin. And so that's when I saw the opportunity of, oh my gosh, I can help them do this. And I naively thought, I can do this on a spreadsheet. So I went all the way back to 2006 or 2008 management of it. But so that's kind of what got me to the point of starting the business. So a little lengthy.
No, well, I needed to know that background, and it seems like your career has a lot of twists and turns and pivots to just taking that next step. And there's so many places that I could take it. But one thing that you kind of kept reiterating was that idea of data analysis, which in the idea of a lot of data, which makes perfect sense when you start to get at that level of scale, dealing with this many businesses, that you need data, things start to turn into, I don't mean to put it this way, but names start to more so become like data points and looking at these trends. So, and that's, I guess, one of the ways that when you get to that level that you actually manage it. So,
Right. You can't possibly, as one individual, manage things. I couldn't continue the trend of reading every single audit report. So then you look for solutions that'll assist you in being able to do that, because the food industry is very lean as far as, they don't have a ton of margin to play with to be able to pay a lot of people to do a lot of different tasks. So a lot of times in manufacturing and in the corporate world, it tends to be on a small group of people to get a lot accomplished. And so it's data points. It's data points and using systems that help you become more efficient.
It's funny that you say that because that was actually something I was thinking about today was the idea of, food manufacturing is a very lean business. And I won't go into the whole job crisis right now, but that's a big topic of discussion that we're not going to definitely go. But one of the things that I also was thinking was, even though we're talking about data, it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, but was there ever a time that you felt over your head with what you were doing and how you combated that?
Oh, I have that, every day of my
Oh,
life.
oh my god. Okay, I won't lie, that makes me feel a little bit better because that's how I feel most of the time. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll let you take that
yeah.
away.
No, no, it's over, there's time. So, yes, every step of every part of my career, I've had that overwhelming feeling, and, I mean, it's the kind of you we rely on cliches to tell us how to manage. And it's funny because the older I get, the more the cliches mean to me. And something that's coming to head is like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I mean, and that's exactly it. The only way forward is to take steps and take action. I'm in a coaching program currently. So that's another thing I will say that helps combat is personal development and really working on your leadership skills, but also just in your human skills. How do you cope with managing life? We have to have a good routine, a good exercise routine, a good mental state. In order to maintain that, you really need it to be consistent because the more inconsistent that you are in your life, most likely you're going to feel that chaos throughout everywhere and it's going to spill over into your career as well. So it's really important to just have that good foundation of routine. And one of the coaching programs that I'm in now, they gave us some advice over the week. Starting off the week, we do like a Monday mindset training, and it was capturing that all or nothing phrase and saying that a lot of us have that mentality that we have to do all or nothing. And so when you look at a large amount of data, looking at it all or nothing, like, okay, so I have to tackle all this now. And we put this urgency into our mind that we have to accomplish everything all at once. And so then we have an extreme amount of stress to be able to deal with it. And what they suggested is instead of saying all or nothing, because then we kind of get frozen, right? So you get
Yes,
frozen in
yes.
this state of mind of like, I can't do it. There's no way to eat an elephant. It's too big. So then they were suggesting to shift in your thoughts. Instead of all or nothing, have all or something. And that way, doing something helps you get to the next point. If you do nothing, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you do something, you're going to get somewhere. And it's kind of like the one step forward, two steps backwards. You might have that, but at least you're still moving forward. Maybe not mathematically in that little cliche, but you are
Huh.
if you are doing something, you're moving forward. And trying to be strategic about how you maneuver and using that routine is a lot of times how I start my day every day the same. I try to at least. So I get up, I spend some time kind of meditative and coffee, drinking my coffee and enjoying it, but really, just thinking through kind of the visualizations that I want for the day and for my career and life. And then I go for a walk with my dog and spend time walking and then getting in a little bit of exercise. So I'm getting a little endorphins running. And I'm spending time with my dog, which I love. And I'm out in nature a little bit.
Mhm.
And it's very peaceful and it starts my day off right. And then I come back and get ready and start my day. And so it's like having that routine is a good foundation base point to start every single day. So, and that helps me not get overwhelmed. So it just kind of that foundation and then doing something. Okay, I know what I'm going to do for the day. And then there's all kinds of tools to development, like the 7 highly effective habits of if
Yep.
effective people or successful people. There's so many tools out there. It's
Oh, for
overwhelming.
sure.
Yeah, it's overwhelming how many tools there are. So pick one, try it, experiment, and then move forward. If it doesn't work, pick another one, try it again.
Just to hear you say that, because to what you were saying with routine, and even today before we got on our call, I was feeling overwhelmed about things, and I found one of the things when I transitioned from a manufacturing setting or when I was in my undergraduate to my degree currently is that there was that lack of structure or routine that
Mhm.
I didn't have. And that made me recognize how much I was lacking routine in my own personal life. And I'm realizing now, well, I got to have somewhere that's a solid in order to really move forward with my schooling and career in that sense. So
Mhm.
it's interesting that even within someone who I've seen, as you're saying, that's very much farther in their career than I am, that you're still taking these simple principles and working at them. That routine is something that is important because for me, the one thing, despite everything, is I make sure I go to bed on the same time and I wake up at the same time. Like that's my
Yeah.
routine. So,
And that's so key. There's some very simple principles that you mentioned that's one is routine. The other one that I really found that just recently it just kind of clicked was the syllabus and how a syllabus helps project your future. And we are used to the professors in our lives or the teachers whenever we're in before we graduate onto college, but the teachers will create those agendas, the syllabus and syllabi for us. And it clicked one day. I was like, I haven't had a syllabus since college, and I really need one.
uh-huh.
And I was like, but no one is responsible for writing that except for me. And so when I realized that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what planning is. That's what business planning is. That's what's when somebody asks you, what is your 5-year goal? Your goals 3, 5, and 10 years from now. And I always felt like, I don't know, I just want to be successful. I just want to move up the ladder. And sometimes I started getting bold when I was a little further in my career. I'm like, I want your job. But that's really not a good answer.
Hmm.
The answer is have you put thought into where you want to go and can you see yourself there? Because if you can't see yourself in the future, so that's like pulling in some of the food, but there's some science to it, law of
Hmm.
attraction stuff. If you can't visualize yourself there, you may never get there. You might land there accidentally, but if you don't plan it, if you don't have directions, how do you know how to build directions to where you're going? If you drive around aimlessly, you're not going to get to your destination because you really haven't defined a destination. Some people like to do that, like, oh, it's fun. Let's just figure out where we land. That's your journey, is your destination. But when you're really saying, okay, I want to go to Florida for my vacation. How are you going to get to Florida? You have actions to take, plans to do. You have to think it through to make sure you're prepared to go to Florida. And you have to know your route. That's a syllabus. That's a
That's
syllabus.
true. That is
Mhm.
absolutely true. And it's funny how much, for many people, we put so much time into, for example, planning our trip for the end of the year, but we don't put as much thought or planning into the next year for your career or
Absolutely.
where you want to be in your life. It's something I think about a lot about people ask me, what are you going to do after you graduate? And I don't have a plan. And that's not something I don't necessarily like to have,
Mhm.
but regardless, as much as I love talking about these types of
Yeah, I
topics,
know. I
because
got us way off course there.
I
Sorry.
know, but it's I had to like keep going in because honestly, it's a topic that really interests me, and I think it applies to a lot. But I want to take our conversation back to the food safety aspects,
Sure.
and I want to talk more about your consultancy in the sense of we talked a little bit about it earlier, but I wanted to dive deeper into what are some of the most common challenges that small and medium businesses they face in regards to food safety, but how is safe food en route?
So most companies right now organically are calling us because they need help with their food safety management systems. We have great traction in that space with the importers that I mentioned. But so we work a lot with the importers, but organically, a lot of the referrals that are coming in are people who need to meet regulatory requirements in their manufacturing facility or a greenhouse, or they want to meet one of those GFSI requirements. So we're spending a lot of time there. And I think you asked about the challenges that those companies have. And I would say the biggest challenge that many companies are facing is that they don't have, especially small and medium ones, because they're growing, they're still growing their budget, they're still growing their operating expense. They sometimes are upside down a little bit in their finances. And we see inadequate resources dedicated to this process for food safety. So, resources in the form of money or team members are usually the limiting factor for them to have success and getting good programs in place. And so, that's one of the things that Safe Food and Root tries to do is provide them with guidance, kind of going back to the conversation about how to manage high volume data. Look for the things that already exist, so that you can use that to be more efficient, and then find people that they can afford to hire, but give them a support structure with the company to be able to offset some of that. We might be a combination of somebody that has less than 10 years in their career and say Food en Route to be able to help with that so that we can help guide them through those questions. Again, kind of going back to the questions I didn't know to ask when I was in that position. We're trying to help tell them these are the questions you should be asking. This is how you should be maneuvering. So a lot of companies hire us to do like retainer work where we might spend 5 or 10 hours a month with them while they navigate through all the challenges themselves. And we're giving them that vision, that visualization of where they need to go. And we're telling them a few of the elements to get there. So we're kind of driving that, just kind of tie it
Okay.
all back, circle it back to that syllabus, but that's what we're doing as food safety
Okay.
consultants. Mhm.
That makes more sense. And that gets me even more curious. Would you be able to provide an example of, let's say, a project or something that has gone well for you and the process of where it's gone to
Yeah.
get it done?
Well, I was trying to think about the answer to this, and I was having a difficult time because we have various clients in various different places of their processes. And, we have one that we're working with where we've written programs for them and they just continuously come back to us for more assistance for kind of ad hoc consulting. But as far as like, what's the experience look like, just so that you can kind of get a concept of how it would work with Safe Food en Route. Many of the clients that are looking for those certifications or those regulatory requirements, we usually come in and do an assessment of what their facility, what their current state is. And we look at where they might have holes in their process. So that might mean, they don't have one of the HACCP programs written, they don't have policies in place that they need in order to meet the requirements that they're going for. So we'll look at that and say, okay, based on this, we predict it's going to take this amount of time for us to be able to create those for you, or in tandem, you'll create them and we'll guide you through the creation of them. So, and then once we get them to that point, then ultimately their goal is to obtain that certification or pass a regulatory inspection. So the happiness factor or the positive experience is passing that. But what we're also trying to do is really push a proactive culture instead of a reactive culture in the food safety, in just the food industry in general.
Hmm.
Because a lot of companies react based on what a customer is saying they need to do, or based on, I didn't pass an audit, or the FDA is coming and I'm freaking out. So the biggest difference in the US is that the FDA is more reactive. Their law is shifting and they're more proactive now than they were. But it really used to be kind of divided up. The meat industry, under USDA regulation would be more proactive because the USDA was there in the facility monitoring and watching the production and making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing to produce safe food. So they're going through regular inspections on a daily basis in our meat industry. The FDA, up until recently, the FDA was doing inspections and audits kind of on a rotating basis and I should say before the Food Safety Modernization Act went into effect, they were doing it every couple of years for some high risk type products. They weren't even going into all the facilities. The registration process was there, the mandates were there, but it was really putting us in a culture of reactive nature. And so that's how the food industry kind of behaves. I'll do it when I'm told I have to. And so that pushes like back to the resource conversation. They'll deprioritize the resources. So that's what we're really trying to do. And the best experiences, the best clients that we have are the ones that really have that proactive mindset
Mhm.
and want to do the right things. And they don't want to do it just because they have to. They want to do it because they know, one, it's the right thing. And two, they know it's good for marketability and brand. They recognize it. So there's a very unique mindset between the two. It's very different. So I would say the positive experiences come to the ones that are in that proactive mindset.
I know. I wish that more companies would have that proactive mindset because, like you said, it's not only is it good for marketability. I mean, it's to do good first of all,
Yeah.
foremost. But you are right. Like there is a marketability in those things that I think would, in especially in today's climate, that consumers really appreciate.
I
Um,
agree.
One of the things that comes to mind is that we're talking about being proactive, but maybe this applies more to when working in the past. But I know in food safety, there can be a lot of pushback, especially if they're not being proactive. How have you dealt with this throughout your career?
Let's back up to that first 10 years of my career, I probably handled it very poorly. There was pushback internally to the companies that I was working in. And so when you have that pressure, and all companies have this pressure, when you're producing a product, the pressure is your customer, who is whoever's purchasing the product, not necessarily who is consuming the product. So the retailers, the wholesalers, you don't want to disappoint them. And there's a lot of high pressure, and the leanness of the industry of that nature, it kind of presents itself as a cutthroat type industry. And so the production supervisors and the logistics team and the distribution team, those people, even the buyer planner, everybody is planning on no problems in the process. And when you're in a food safety position, you are presenting problems. Like you're
Mhm.
coming in and saying, well, now we have a problem.
That's a lot of the job, yes.
Right. We have to stop production. We have to stop this. I mean, the nature of proactive is designing those systems, those processes, getting the policies and procedures and forms in place so that you limit the amount of times that you have that. But if you don't have that well thought through in a company, and you'll get pushback from it. So one of the keys to dealing with it now, and you mentioned clients are coming to us to get this, yes. But what I will tell you is the mistake a lot of them make is, we want you to write the programs, and we want to be able to turn in that we have these programs, but then they don't necessarily want to do the work to sustain the programs that we know, as with our experience, that they need to do. And that's
Okay.
hiring the right people, automating the right things, having a dedicated team to it. So sometimes they will not put that person in place. They'll hire, they want to hire us to do the work, and then they're kind of like, get in and get out. They don't want us to spend time there, which, as consultants, you don't want to be there long term, because then you're an employee. But at the same time, you want to see them transition to that new culture. So to me, food safety culture is key, and that making sure that everyone in the ladder of the organization, from sourcing products, buying it, to planning out the production, and then anyone that's involved in production and shipping, they need to understand the food safety in all elements. And so there's ways to go about that tactic before, especially if you see some kind of issue. And it's asking some questions. Is this going to cause someone injury or illness or even potential death? If that answer is yes, the answer is always do not ship. If it's
Mhm.
not yes, then the next question is something like, is this going to cause a quality issue that causes a complaint? If the answer is yes, then you're kind of doing a risk assessment of how bad is it? Will it be damaging to the company? Will there be financial loss? Is it going to risk the brand? So, like, having some strong questions built into the process for the team to rely on are really good to be able to help just facilitate those conversations, because the pushback comes from the knee jerk reaction of wanting to please somebody. And pleasing somebody still is the goal. So reminding them that you're not going to please them if you have an issue that causes a complaint. It's going to be
Mhm.
different. They're going to still be disappointed if you miss the
Right.
shipping date, but they'd rather you miss the shipping date because you were stopping product from getting to the consumer that was going to cause a recall or even a withdrawal, which might be more of a quality issue.
Well, as much as I would love to even dive into more to that, we are coming to the end of our time, which has flown by. So I gotta quickly ask you two things. I always like to ask my guests, what piece of advice would you give to someone or a student or graduate, and in your case, particularly thinking about going into a career in food safety?
Food safety, to me, there's two things that I kind of think on with food safety. If you're thinking about food safety, we desperately need you. So please go that route because one, the food always is going to be there. We're always going to have food production. So there's going to be a limitless amount of jobs, most likely. And it's always going to be required by law to meet food safety regulations. So, there's a lot there. And from a personality standpoint, food safety, it's not that way every time, but there's a lot of black and white where it's very clear. You either hit the temperature to kill the pathogen or you don't. You either keep allergens separated or you don't. And you have data to support your decisions, which is very helpful whenever you're trying to justify a reason of an action. And you don't have that for quality necessarily, although you will find yourself in food safety and quality all lumped in one. But that at least gives you some, good, clear boundaries. So that personality type that needs that kind of like reassurance to make decisions, it's in food safety. So that'd be my push on food safety. But we have a shortage all the time of food safety experts. We need more.
Well, that's one important reason why I had to get you on the show, hopefully to inspire some of the listeners to really consider genuinely going into food safety because it's a lifelong career and there's so many paths you can take, such as yourself. So, last question I have to ask, where can people find you?
Most of my activity, I mean, you can find me on most of the social media applications, but I would say the place that you're going to easily find me is LinkedIn. And then I have Safe Food and Root business page there, but also just find me, Jennifer Crandall, on there as well, because I'm very active. I share a lot of information and I'm always willing to answer questions, especially to food scientists, students, and people who are thinking about going down that food safety career. I give back a lot into the schools and enjoy very much that engagement to inspire food safety professionals and that are young in their career or having been started. The other place on my website, www.safefoodonroute.com, is an easy way to find me as well.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it. With this conversation, this is just a taste of so much that I could imagine having more conversations. So once again, thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming on the show. Honestly, I wish I could have asked you so much more, but unfortunately time is limited. So
Absolutely, Veronica. I appreciate your time and I'm willing to come back anytime that you invite me. We can dive into some of these other topics a little bit more in depth if you'd like.
I love it. That was episode 35 of the FoodGrads Podcast. All the notes to this podcast can be found on the FoodGrads homepage by clicking on the podcast tab there. There, you can find any notes to past or future episodes. Do you know anyone you would like me to have on the show? Perhaps yourself, or maybe a specific career that you would like me to explore a little bit more. Then you should reach out to me and let me know. You can email me at veronica@foodgrads.com or any of the FoodGrads social media channels. Hope to hear from you. Jennifer has had such a rich career in food safety, and it becomes very evident in this episode. Her advice on taking things a step at a time is something that we all need to hear now and again. When editing this episode, I had to pause and just take it in. As students in school, it can be so overwhelming just doing assignments, let alone deciding on your future. We need to take things a step at a time, and that's how you complete anything. So everyone listening, you got this. Take things a step at a time. Remember, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next week.